First up, we're going to have Rafael Moro Aguilar from Florida International University representing the International Institute of Space Law.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. My name is Rafael Moro Aguilar. I teach international law at Florida International University, and I've been involved for the last 2 years in the problem of light pollution of the night skies, what international law is on this topic, and what international law could provide as a solution for this topic. Although I teach at Florida International University, I'm here representing the International Institute of Space Law, because we published this year a report on light pollution of the night sky from a space law perspective of a working group that I was chairing for the last 2 years. I want to thank the Center for the Protection of the Sky for inviting me here, particularly Dr. Bowley, Dr. Williams, and I want to thank also Dr. Green for engaging yesterday night a group of us in a very interesting and lively discussion. Okay. Watching some art a few days ago, and then I realized that this may be one of the first depictions ever of Alan. What do you think? You can still make the Big Dipper, of course, but you could see that lighting in the city started becoming a problem around the end of the 19th century, right? Okay, well, neither Van Gogh nor anyone else at the time could have guessed or imagined is that one day we will see the sky like this. This is not, of course, a real-life picture. This is a long-time exposure. But you can see the trails of so many satellites, and this is, of course, has been the picture chosen for this symposium, as the symbol for this symposium. I particularly like and find it particularly enlightening. Since May 2019, we all know we are living in the age of large constellations, of satellites, many thousands of satellites in low Earth orbit, which are intended to provide global coverage of broadband internet, which is good, which is beneficial. However, the unintended effect of all these constellations is that they're gradually changing the appearance of the night sky. Several studies suggest, and you know this better than I do, that the number of astronomical observations will be affected by all these satellites, such as detection of objects, including the crucial aspect of detecting near-Earth objects, close to twilight particularly, or wide-angle surveys of the night sky, or radio astronomy. Other impacts can be expected as well outside the field of astronomy, and on culture and ceremonies of indigenous populations, on the cycles of animal life, and on the ability of the general public to view and enjoy a natural and pristine night sky. In 2021, the Board of Directors of the International Institute of Space Law agreed to form a new working group on the light pollution of the night sky from a space law perspective. For those of you who may not know what IISL is, this is like the International Astronomical Union is for astronomers. This is the largest worldwide association of international space lawyers. The group completed this report, which was coordinated by the present speaker, completed this report earlier this year. We have 10 contributors, 110 pages, and we expect it will become a useful contribution to the discussion of this particular topic. It's my pleasure to share with you today the main results and conclusions of this report. This is a highly technical problem, and in principle requires technical solutions. However, this can also be seen as a legal problem, because we have two human activities that seem to be conflicting with each other. We have large constellations of satellites on the one hand. We have astronomical observations, plus stargazing, indigenous, and other affected groups on the other hand. What we found is, of course, that there is currently no specific regulation of this topic anywhere in international law or in national law. However, we found that a number of international space law rules, some general international law rules, and some pieces of national legislation can either apply or at least be relevant to our current situation, and they can help provide they could help provide solutions. If we want to find solutions, we could get inspired by these certain pieces of legislation. The most important one, of course, is the 1967 Outer Space Treaty. This is usually considered the cornerstone of contemporary international space law. And Article 1 of the Outer Space Treaty establishes freedom to use outer space, and this would include through the use of large satellite constellations. However, it also establishes freedom to conduct scientific investigation in outer space. So what we have is that both astronomy and satellite constellations constitute legitimate and lawful activities according to international law. The Outer Space Treaty does not establish any kind of priority or hierarchy between competing space activities. So both activities can be considered to be on equal footing and will have to coexist and achieve coordination. Next article that we consider of extreme importance or very, very important for this topic is Article 3 of the Outer Space Treaty, which establishes that space activities must be conducted in accordance with international law. This is very important because this opens the way to the application of other branches of international law in outer space, including or such as international environmental law. Some principles of international environmental law that could apply here include prevention of transboundary harm, sustainable use, the precautionary principle. States have the duty to avoid the contamination of areas located beyond their national jurisdiction. One of such areas, of course, being outer space. If you want to know what the other, we may elaborate, or you may find in the report more information on what the other principles mean and how they could apply to this, to a particular situation. Then Article 6 of the Outer Space Treaty establishes state responsibility for all national activities, including those activities carried out by non-governmental or private entities. And private space activities require authorization and continuing supervision. This means that states are responsible to make sure that all space actors, including the operators of satellite constellations, act in conformity with the Outer Space Treaty and respect the treaty and international law generally. States have the duty to ensure compliance of private operators with applicable international law, and they must guarantee a responsible and sustainable use of the Earth's orbital space environment. And this should definitely include the issue of light pollution caused by their space objects. Article 9 of the Outer Space Treaty is yet another limitation to the freedoms that were established in Article 1. States parties to the treaty have several duties. They have to pay due regard to the corresponding interests of other states. They must avoid harmful interference with the activities of others. And this would include, for instance, the visual interference caused by satellite constellations on astronomy. And the states must also prevent contamination of outer space and changes of the Earth's environment. Now, is light pollution included? We have included this in our report with an interrogation mark. It might be argued, it might be considered, that introduction of sunlight collected in space in the Earth's atmosphere and in the Earth's environment could constitute an introduction of a light pollution and therefore a breach of Article 9 of the Outer Space Treaty. But we have not fully explored this possibility yet. In any case, Article 9 also includes the obligation to consult with affected state parties in case of ongoing or potential harmful interference. Now, the key question, the million-dollar question, you could say, is ground-based astronomy protected under Article 9? And some of my colleagues here have also considered this possibility. It is not clear from the text. However, historical interpretation, that is at least my interpretation, strongly suggests that ground-based astronomy is included in the protections of Article 9 of the Outer Space Treaty, because the origin of Article 9 can be found in certain large-scale experiments that were conducted in low Earth orbit during the early 1960s, like Project West 4. Remember, there was a talk here on Project West 4 and the nuclear explosions in low Earth orbit in the early 1960s. Well, out of those, sorry? 3 minutes? Oh, yeah. The effects of these experiments were felt both in outer space and on the Earth. And Article 9 came out of those effects that were felt both in space and on the Earth. So I strongly think or suggest that ground-based astronomy is protected under Article 9. Now, what is the problem with Article 9? It is a very vague. Terms are not defined anywhere. Harmful interference, due regard, no definitions included of those terms, pollution, contamination of outer space. And there is a lack of state practice so far. It has rarely been invoked by states, and no international consultations whatsoever have ever taken place yet, under Article 9 at least. However, we still need rules. Either we have to implement Article 9, or generally establish a new regulation on the issue of light pollution of the night sky. So some international rules, standards, guidelines that are applied uniformly to all operators are very much needed at this point. If the international community decides to create such uniform international standards, an excellent forum to do so would be the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. You will hear a lot about this committee these days. This is a committee that was created by the General Assembly to deal with outer space issues already back in 1959. These eventual standards could use as a model some guidelines and standards that have already been adopted in this UN body. The idea would be, in particular, the idea with light pollution would be to create a series of non-binding guidelines that states would accept and gradually apply through their national space laws. This is a model, a proven model, that offers flexibility and at the same time certainty to governments and operators. In the longer term, we can be bold, we can dream, and we can think of that the international community might decide to conclude new international agreements protecting astronomy, or stargazing generally, or protecting the quality of the night sky. The possibility of declaring, for instance, astronomy or stargazing or the night sky as a world human heritage. Some soft law texts already exist in this regard, such as the Starlight Declaration that was adopted here in La Palma in 2007. We also have the precedents, of course, of UNESCO protecting certain astronomical heritage sites, or the International Dark Sky Association conferring dark sky status to certain areas or countries around the world. In addition, certain international texts that already exist acknowledge the importance of participation in cultural life and science, as well as the right of indigenous peoples to perform ceremonies and maintain their traditions. Some of them, those traditions are related, and ceremonies are related to the stars. And in our report, in particular, we include, or we mention, the 1966 International Covenant on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights that has been signed and ratified by virtually most countries in the world, or the 2007 UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which again is soft law, but still it is a very important guiding text in this area. All of this suggests, the presence of all these texts suggests that stargazing and the right to a natural dark night sky are increasingly viewed as a fundamental or human right under international law. Solutions may also come from national space law. Am I running out of time? Our working group also looked for, in case there was any national legislation regulating the brightness of space objects. We found none. There is nothing at this point. The only related national rule is a United States federal law prohibiting obtrusive space advertising. This does not apply exactly to our case. However, it provides an interesting precedent of states listening to astronomers, taking their concerns into consideration, the International Astronomical Union in particular, taking their concerns into consideration, and protecting the value of the dark night sky on a global scale, not on the local or national regulatory level, on the global, on the national, international scale. And there's, of course, a large number of national and local laws and regulations protecting the quality of the night sky. All these laws, if the progressive deterioration of the quality of the global night sky continues, all these local laws protecting the quality of locally of the dark night sky will be useless in practice. The conclusions, well, basically is all what I already said, so thank you very much.
We have time for one question, if anybody has a question. Over there.
Thank you. I think most of what you've said applies to stargazing and dark skies, and of course the other problem that was highlighted was the radio spectrum and UMRs. How does what you're proposing, how will that include the radio sky?
Yes, our working group, at the beginning we considered the possibility of including also radio interference and radio astronomy, but we didn't have enough expertise and enough people to do that. At the end, we focused on optical astronomy, on the visual interference only, but many of the things that we say in our report that are good for optical astronomy could also perfectly apply for interference with radio astronomy and radio telescopes. Since we're talking about international law principles and rules of a broad character, many of them, they could also help the case of radio astronomy. I definitely think so. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Rafael.
Thank you very much.